Last session, we talked about hardware, the physical parts of a computer. Software are the instructions that make the computer do the thing that you need it to do. So software is built into a number of different parts. We're going to go through that today. As we go through our answers, as we did before, I'd expect you to pause from time to time to take notes because, as I said, this will be included in your summer test. So first, what is software? So software are instructions that make a computer process the input to give you a desired output. So these instructions might be called programs or apps or applications. So they basically make the computer do the things that you need it to do. Okay. So on your phone, you'll have two completely, like your phone obviously is a very basic type of computer, but you've got two very different types of software on your phone. So the first is the thing that makes the phone run and operate. So it controls things like the light, it controls when to turn on and off certain things, it controls downloading things from the internet, all of that. So that's called the operating system. So with a computer, you might have an operating system like Windows, or you might have Mac OS, or on your phone you might have Android. So that's the operating system. But separate from the operating system, then you have the apps which process the data. So that would be, let's say, if you want to do some typing, you might use word processing. So we'll come and talk about those a little bit later on. But there's lots of different types of apps, of programs, and you will need to know some of them. And most of them you've already used, so you should know a lot of these. So you have to think about what each of them does. So some of them will be used for doing calculations, some are for manipulating text, some of them will allow you to get access to the internet. So they all do something a little bit different. And as I said before, there's two main types of software. So you got your operating system or your apps, or also known as programs. So they basically process the data to do what it is you want. So I'd expect you to pause now, and can you just take notes on the questions that you have on the screen? So when we talk about surfing the internet, we use a thing called an internet browser or a search engine. So internet browser is the icons you see on the screen. So you have on the left, we've got Edge, which is on the Windows-based machines. It comes as default in the Windows-based machines. You've got Google Chrome, which you can download for free. Safari is another one that isn't listed here. That's one that you have on Mac-based machines or on iPhones. And you've got Firefox. So they're all different browsers that allow you to browse or use the internet. Search engines are a little bit different. Search engines, Google, for example, would be a good search engine. This is where you type in questions and you get information. So the internet browser is the program on the computer that allows you to access the information on the internet, and the search engine is a particular application that allows you to use the internet to find specific piece of information. When you type in questions, it goes and finds information for you. So if you type into a search engine, plumber, it might give you a list of the plumbers who are located near you if your location has been turned on for the particular machine. So what I want you to do is think of the questions you have on the screen. So you've used the internet already lots in first and second year. We did quite a bit of work on it in first year. Think about 5 things that you use it for. So just list 5 things that you use it for, either in school or maybe at home, maybe what your parents might use it for. And then think of 3 things that a business could use the internet for. How could it be useful for businesses? So I want you to go and record those, please, in your copy so that I can have a look at them. And I'll be clicking pause now at this stage. Okay, so when we talk about managing text, there's a particular application. Now, there's a number of different variations. I have 2 of them here. One is called Microsoft Word that you'd recognize and you've already used in the top left hand corner. I have TextEdit, which is something more basic that I have on my Mac. There are other versions as well. There's Notepad, which is built into the Windows machines. So all of those are examples of word processing. Okay, so if I ask you what do you use to manage text, you would say I use word processing. The brand that you might use might be called Microsoft Word or something else, but what you're actually using is you're using a word processing program or application. So that's for you would type. So as you can see in the top left hand, you can see that we can change the type of script that we have. We can change the size of the writing. We can make things in bold, arrange it into paragraphs, delete, add. So all of that is what I mean when I talk about managing text. So what have you done in school already, or maybe what do you think you could do in school that might be useful with a word processing application? And make sure you have notes that remind you what is word processing. We'll be clicking pause now. Another thing that you've seen me regularly using in class for doing calculations is a program called Excel. Now, Excel is a brand name for a program which is doing what they call a spreadsheet. So that's a spreadsheet application. Excel is just one example, but there are lots of other examples of spreadsheets that you can use. But a spreadsheet allows you to put in three things into all of the cells or boxes on the screen. So you can put in text, words, you can put in numbers, or you can put in formulas. So it will allow you to do calculations. So one example of what we've done is I did trading profit and loss with you. And when I did that, I would have used Excel to do all the calculations for me. And it means that if you change one number, all of the rest, if you've got formulas in it, all the rest of the numbers will follow suit. So it's very easy to kind of keep track of things and make corrections very, very quickly. So now I want you to think of three things that you could use this for at home or in school. So what could you use this for? I'm going to click pause now. Just make sure you take notes on what this is an application called a spreadsheet. So make sure you recorded what a spreadsheet is used for. Okay, the next we have here is called a database. So a database is a computerized filing system. So on the left-hand side of the screen, if you imagine that you've got a filing cabinet and you've got folders inside in the filing cabinet, and each folder has information on one particular subject of data, something that you're collecting. So you might want to collect information on, if you're a business, you might collect it on your customers. But let's say if I just use the example in school, we've used a database called VSware, and that stores on all of the students in the school, but also on the teachers. It stores information like name, address, date of birth, the subjects that you're studying, what teachers you have, your reports, if there's medical records. So it stores lots of information on different data subjects, and all of that information is stored under different fields. And the thing that makes it useful is I can search the fields to find out specific answers. So for example, let's just say Mr. Foley is looking for candidates for, let's say, a football team. So he wants to find out who would be an under 14 player. He can do a search for all of the students in the school whose ages show that they were born before a certain date. So he'll have a list of all the potential candidates who could be eligible for that particular team, rather than going and calling out students and saying, what's your date of birth? All the information is there, so you get answers very quickly. So if you're storing information on a huge amount of people, imagine you're storing information on thousands and thousands of customers, or maybe a library has on all of the many hundreds or thousands of customers who are renting books from the library. We can store information on all of them and find out what books have they read, what have they used in the past. Amazon in particular uses this for deciding what products to give you hints at when you go to your website. So what I want you to do is think about what a business could use a website, or sorry, a database for. Remember, a database is a computerized filing system. So what different things do you think businesses want to file information on that we could then very quickly search through afterwards using a database? So I'll click pause now. So we move on to communication. So when we talk about communication, we have to talk about the difference between formal and informal communication. So formal communication really is where you it tends to be something, let's say a business with customers, or something where there must be a formal record that this communication took place. We would tend to use maybe a more formal language. So if you're writing a consumer complaint letter, for example, you have to follow a very set structure that I've been showing you about in first year. And when we talked about letters and business documents this year, we've talked about, the particular structure that you have to follow. So they're formal letters. Informal might be a bit more casual, use different kinds of language. You're not too bothered if people don't necessarily respond to your messages. You might be giving information and don't expect necessary response, or you want somebody to respond, but it's something that tends to be a bit more casual, used for social arrangements, not for business purposes. So we have things like, Snapchat and WhatsApp, and I presume you recognize this icon here. So that's Zoom. So that's a way of communicating using a bit like what we had in Teams. So we use that for online stuff, and obviously you can turn on and off cameras, whatever. But it's a way of people keeping in touch. Those can be used for formal and informal. So a lot of businesses, when they're talking to customers, they might, maybe during COVID times, they might have used Zoom or Teams meetings for these kind of official formal meetings, and they might even record it so there's a record that the meeting took place. We've also looked at the likes of using Outlook for sending emails. So emails is a very common one nowadays, and I know friends might informally email each other, but businesses might decide it's a good formal way of keeping in touch with maybe their suppliers or their customers, whatever. So what we need you to do then is just write a note. What's the difference between using formal and informal applications? So the applications is what you see on the screen. So they're the apps or the programs that we might have used. And what's the difference between using each of them? I've pretty much discussed a lot of it. Obviously, you may look at the textbook. Maybe it might help you as well. And that chapter that I have, chapter 19 on digital technologies. So I'll just click pause now, just so you have a chance to answer that particular question. Okay, so being creative. So what you have here of examples of a whole range of different things. So businesses, when you think of being creative, you might talk about art and drawing, but businesses have to be creative because they have to come up with ideas for products. So products nowadays, we design them using a variety of computer-aided design. So that's called CAD, C-A-D. You may see the students in Leaving Cert who are doing technical drawing. They use computer programs, a CAD program, so that they can actually design products to be made, but they design it using a computer. So you've got on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got some examples of designing a building, or designing a car engine, an airplane engine, and a drone. So those are all designed using computers. So it can design individual parts, and we can, these designs are 3D, so we can turn them around on the screen and we can see what the parts would look like. So it's a really good way of designing things before you ever actually start making anything. So we don't have to start trying to make an engine. We can design what the engine would look like and how it would actually function before we ever start going and grabbing pieces of metal and trying to shape it, so that we'd find out if it's likely to work correctly or not. So it's very much used for where people have ideas and they want to try and put their ideas into an actual design in paper. Top left-hand corner there, for example, you might see that could be an example of, maybe it could be a building. so people can design buildings and design fire escapes before you even put the foundation down, so that we would know where do we put the light switches, where are the lights going to be, where do we need to put stairs. All of that we can design using computers. Now on the right hand side of the screen we've got some examples of being creative with the likes of pictures and graphics. So we've got programs like Photoshop allow you to photo edit. So we had computer aided design for businesses designing products, but photo editing software allows you to take pictures and maybe change them. So if we're going to do, let's say, an advertising campaign, maybe for a CBA for a product, we might maybe take a picture of our design and maybe make it look better by having better light on it, or making, altering the shape of it ever so slightly to make it look better. So all of that is trying to be creative and coming up with ideas and turning those ideas into something that could be useful for the business. So what I want you to do now is I want you to think about 3 ways technology could be useful for a business to be creative. And in particular, maybe the example, if you had done enterprise for your CBA, can you think about how could you have been creative with your product? Because obviously if you can be creative, you might come up with really interesting new ideas, maybe ideas for how to advertise, ideas for how to make products, ideas for how to change what the product looks like or the packaging. So think about that, and just take note of 3 different ways a business could use this technology to be creative. I'll click pause now. So what you have on the screen now is the second piece of homework. Now you should have a lot of the explanations already done. If you've been following what I've had in this video and you've been stopping and taking notes as I asked you to do, then you should have a lot of the explanations already done. If you don't, can you just go back to the video and just look at that part so you can just take note of what all of these are. The software, again, we would have talked about that earlier on, and I'm just asking you to list the software that you use. Okay, not necessarily businesses or schools, but what software do you use and what do you use it for? And you should really have at least 5 different pieces of software. Probably you could have 10 or 15, but I'm looking for you to list the software, and that's your second piece of homework.